so let me start out by asking about the conference, right? Because we're at the SCU 2024 conference. So what are your thoughts so far on this year's conference?
Well, just like every time I come here, it's still the only conference I go to because it's the only one I feel is completely serious about the topic. You're not gonna. There's no vendors. There's no anything. It's just people getting together to talk about actual research within this field. So that's why I keep coming back.
Well, I tend to agree. I've been really impressed and surprised by the focus on science, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's the most exciting thing. I mean, so far there have only been a couple of speakers, but Ross Colhart, he did a giant presentation, and then Dr. Kevin Newth spoke, and we've had Micah Hanks do some, interim stuff. So, so far it has been, it seems like it's invigorating, it's exciting, but it's also very focused on rigorous scientific research.
Yeah, I think that's really the boon to the SCU conference versus like other conferences, because it's a small conference. It's not. It is only focused on the science of UAP. It's not. Nobody's peddling books here. Nobody's peddling anything other than, hey, look what we're doing. And that's really the most important thing, is because this is a community of actual like-minded people sharing ideas, collaborating, and that's one of the big things that our field really needs, is a lot more collaboration in the serious science.
Okay. Well, so from what I understand, I think the theme of this one is bridging the gap. That's the conference theme. But then one of the other things that I've seen is a lot of coalition building. And I think you had said earlier that's something that you're looking at as well, right? With UAPx and some of your endeavors.
Yeah, we've said since day one, anybody serious in the field we're willing to at least work with or at least collaborate with. And I know there's a lot of back talk now where a lot of us want to start coming under more one umbrella, start consolidating funds, because there's not a whole lot of money in this field.
Yeah.
So if we can combine our resources and our abilities and the things that we all do the best, because it seems like every organization kind of has their niche, what they do. And some of them are overlapping in what they do, whether it's analyzing data or taking witness testimony or doing like what UAPx does in the field research. Everybody seems to kind of have their own thing going on, when, if we came together and combined our resources, we would get things done far faster, and we wouldn't have to keep reinventing the wheel every single time we get a brand new acronym out to go look for UFOs or UAP or, whatever you want to call them now, next week they'll reclassify it again so that you have to resubmit all your FOIAs. So
change the name of the phenomena and
then change the name of the office. How many times have they changed that office's name since 2019?
Yeah, they keep changing the name of the office. They have a new head now, or at least the interim head, I think.
I think that's probably for the better. I don't think there's really anything productive going on prior to this, and I think it's frustrating for those in Aero that were trying to do their due diligence. And I think that there was a lot of there was at least a small amount of what do you mean, when they came out with a lot of their conclusions. So let me ask about that, because again, for me, I went back and I was like, where can I kind of plant my flag in terms of where this begins? And for me, that was the OD&I report in June 2021, where they said, UAP clearly they may pose a risk to flight safety, right? And I was like, okay, that is the place to start, right? There you have the Office of the Director of National Intelligence saying UFOs are real and they may pose a risk to flight safety. I'm like, that's a place to start. And that validates your experience, right, in the Nimitz event. And so then it goes to Aero, and we had this report that came out that seems to almost backpedal on some of that. It did backpedal quite hard, and that kind of disappointed me, because you got people like Ryan Graves that literally, these are these combat pilots that are engaged, you're not engaging with these objects, but they're seeing the objects. They're showing that they could pose flight safety risks. They're there. This isn't figment of 30, there's so many pilots. I get emails from pilots all the time, commercial, military. I'm sure Ryan and the actual, fighter pilots, I'm sure they get inundated with people saying, yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
Because it's not likely that somebody flies in the air for more than 30 years and doesn't see something odd. So it's not whether or not there's something going on. It's about what it is. It's like I get a lot of flack because I'm not looking for little green men, but I'm looking for technology that I've witnessed flying through the sky. Who knows what the technology actually is? Nope. And I don't really think anybody really knows exactly what the UAP phenomenon is, and I think it's probably a lot of different things going on. But talking from just the physical aspect of what we tracked when I was in the service, I'm still on the fence with all of what it is. The only thing I can in my opinion, I can say honestly is that I have seen technology that I can't explain.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the only real facts that I have. That's the whole purpose of UAPx.
Well, so can we, I guess, could we definitively say that these are technological craft in origin? Right?
I think there are technological craft in origin.
Okay.
I think that there are other phenomenon that are going on that may be completely differently related, but are classified under the same umbrella just because they are flying.
Well, and the reason I asked that is, this was something I was kind of thinking about on the flight down here. I was like, how much can we narrow this down based on the evidence that we have, right? And so,
when it comes down to it, you can only use we can only use the evidence that we can quantify. So if we can't quantify it, which means nuts and bolts, then we can't use it. At least to further our efforts in studying them. But then again, there could be other issues like with the light balls that people see. Are they plasma? Are they what are they? Are they a high energy particle? I have no idea. I'm not a physicist, so I'm not going to even try to. But they seem to move on their own. But then again, it could be attracted to something and seem like it's moving. It could be affected by electromagnetic fields and move around. So there could be multiple reasons that they move around. But I have no idea either. So, but we just try to focus on, like I said, the nuts and bolts, things that we can actually quantify.
Yeah.
So, and that's I think that's the most important place to start. Only because even if there is some crazier aspects of it, it may lead us down that rabbit hole. So quantify what you can, and then just keep working. If you can't quantify it, put it on a shelf, label it unquantifiable, and then move on to the quantifiable, and that's it.
This seems like the year for rabbit holes, and the reason I say that is, less than a year ago, well, I guess it was maybe just about a year ago, we had David Grush come out. And then, coming up on a year, right? This August, it'll be about a year since he testified in front of Congress. Mm-hmm. And then we had the Schumer Rounds Act. So we have been kind of going from the evidence down this rabbit hole, and what they have said is that there's a lot of evidence out there. Apparently, none of us are classified to see what that is.
Yeah, that is a bit depressing, and dealing with a lot of things back when I was in the service that were classified, there definitely is an issue with like an overclassification problem. Anything that was in my space was classified. It could literally have been how to vacuum the filter, but because it's on a classified piece of equipment, it's a classified procedure. All it is literally vacuuming a filter, but because it's a procedure on a top secret piece of equipment, it's classified.
Yeah.
I could provide a log for the day about the equipment. Nothing in it remotely can be used. No frequencies, no numbers, just status good, status good, status good, classified. So even the operational status would be classified for obvious reasons, but the daily logs of doing mundane things or anything to do with any equipment that's a classified piece of equipment is going to render classified information. Like the one thing that I found odd about the Nimitz encounter is that they didn't see, they took the radar data, but they didn't make me sign an NDA or anything like that. But when they took the data about the sound of the object, that was completely classified. Those guys had to sign, apparently had to sign NDAs. Now that information's coming from one of the gentlemen that worked in the sonar room after he had been drinking, so take it with a grain of salt.
Well,
but all those guys had been threatened, apparently, that if they disclose anything about, catching a passive, what they call passive track, or the sound of the object, is that they would go to the brig, they'd go to jail.
Okay.
So.
Now, one of the things that interested me, going back to Nimitz, was this anti-ballistic missile warning system, I guess. And I think Kevin Day had talked about that. I don't remember if you had.
See, I don't really. That's something that I heard about like just recently after the fact. So I have no idea where that came from.
Okay.
That very well could have been somebody from another seat that deals with that, adding it to the story, because there's so many people that do so many different jobs on the ship.
Yeah.
It's like you got Kevin, which is an operations specialist. They literally just operate things. That's literally in the name, right? So, and they see he sits in combat, and he was a higher rank, so he was actually an operations. He was running the show. Where I'm a technician, I'm making sure all of it's running and making sure it's working as it should, making sure everything is not faulty and things of that nature. And so everybody's got a different aspect of the job. So something like that I'd have no privy to. I wouldn't even know about it, so I can't really speak on it. So that would definitely something you'd have to talk to Kevin Day about if that's his,
Well, what intrigued me about that one, though, was if I remember correctly, that played into these calculations on speed and acceleration, right? Because from what Kevin had said, and I could be mistaken on part of this, but I think the estimation was if that goes off, it means it's an inbound space object. And so they're saying, okay, here's the height of it, and I think that was on radar as well, right?
From what I witnessed, I've only witnessed from 28,000 feet to sea level, and I've heard higher, but that's what I've heard it from other people. I didn't see it myself. So.
Okay.
So 28,000 feet, what I'm familiar with, and that was only after the intercept. Prior to the intercept, when we were just tracking them, they were just sitting at 30,000 feet doing 1 knot, or 100 knots. That's what 100 knots. Just, and honestly, that's almost floating across the sky.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost as if the behavior of these objects, the way I've heard it described. The way that I view that in my head is it's like they're doing their own thing. They don't really care that much.
And we just interrupted them, and they're reacting to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. We basically left them alone, tracking them for 7 days, and then all of a sudden we sent an F-18 to go see what they are.
Well, and then the other thing, and this goes to where the Nimitz carrier group was located, right? Like one of the things you had said to me, we were talking last night, and you said that when you went to Catalina Island, like nearly everyone there has some kind of UFO sighting or other.
Yeah, when me and Sean Cahill had gone there to film a TV show, talking to the locals, because at that time it was during COVID, so there was nobody off the island allowed unless you had like a special access like we did. So the film company that we were working with, they had special access to the island, so it was just us and the locals.
Okay.
So, in the morning when I get up and go down into town for coffee and stuff like that, because it's a tiny little place. There's only so many people allowed to live on the island. There's only most of it's a preserve, so there's only so much land. There can never be more land than is currently developed. And if it has to go through all kinds of hoops if you do want to develop something else, but usually it's a utility-based thing that gets developed, not private property or anything like that. But long story short, talking with the locals, I had actually started talking to an old military guy. He retired on the island after he was in the service for a number of years, him and his wife, and he's like, you don't live on this island very long without seeing something streak through the sky. And if you don't see something, you're either staring at your feet all the time or you haven't lived here very long. That was the exact statement that he gave me.
So, and then the other thing, and I think this was Sean Cahill who had said this. He went down to Ensenada in Baja California, and had said that, and this is, I guess, on the other side of this event area, right?
Yeah, that would be on the south side when it would start disappearing off our scopes.
Yeah, and the story there was apparently these Tic Tacs are so prevalent that they have fishing lore about them that goes back hundreds of years from what he'd said.
Yeah, I've heard about that with I think it's him and Lou that had been down there talking with fishermen and stuff like that. It would be a secondhand story for me. You'd have to talk to Sean about it, but it's I have heard that.
Yeah, it was him and Lou. Yeah, thank you for yeah. It's it's intriguing. So it seems to be this area is a hot spot, and
It seems so, but there just seem to be a lot of the same kind of stories around most islands. You know, you go into the Philippines, you go into Micronesia, you get the same stories. You go into go to Hawaii, they a lot of locals that have been there their whole life got the same kind of stories. You know, and I think any place that has a lot of open sky is going to end up having these stories,
Well, and Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet has been talking about, like what he was talking about is undersea base, right? And I think most people are familiar with the, what do they call it, the Google Maps anomaly that's, it's off the coast of Los Angeles, basically. So.
You can actually, there's old survey maps too, geologic survey maps that you can see that they've mapped underneath there for, decades. So you see the shelf that they're talking about, and I don't know if there's an underground base there. I know Gaudet had the Rear Admiral. He did do a sonar sweep of a small area over there for the Galileo project, and so I mean there is some active research going in that area, but you also have all kinds of other problems over there too, because it's considered a natural disaster area just north of Catalina, between California, between LA and Catalina Island. There's a bunch, thousands of barrels of DDT that were dumped over there.
Ah, that's right. I forget.
Yeah, so I mean, you got basically this huge toxic dump that's just waiting. I mean, I guarantee these barrels are just, waiting to just bust. I don't know what they're made of, but I mean, back when they were dumped, they were probably steel barrels.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's not. So I mean, you got all this DDT just sitting in there too. So, an ecological disaster area. To be honest with you, I mean, that's. I mean, I remember in the '80s seeing these things about DDT where, they made getting into the water supply and making the shells on bald eagles' eggs, brittle.
Yeah.
And because they were drinking the water, and then it would make their shells brittle, and they'd actually sit on their eggs and kill their eggs. So I mean, that's actually one of the things that led to the banning of DDT. So I mean,
yeah, I had forgotten about that, but now that you mention it, I remember reading about that. They were just dumping these barrels off the coast area.
Yep,
there.
there was just a company that had a contract to get rid of the waste, and they just went off the coast and just dumped them in a drink.
Yeah.
So it was pretty sad. And it's one of the most irresponsible things not the most irresponsible thing, but it is a very irresponsible thing that I've, probably one of, at least to my top 10 list of, I can't believe people did that.
But, again, going back to UAP specifically, what interests me is this notion that maybe what we're dealing with are ocean-based visitors, life forms.
For me, it kind of makes sense because I mean, there's one place on the entire planet where you can, over the period of a lot of time, you can collect every element known to man. Every element known to man is in seawater. It's a perfect solution for dissolving everything. At a certain point, everything's going to get worn down in this ocean. And so you literally have every single element known to man in the ocean. Now, granted, if you are doing, you're advanced enough to where you can build things on a molecular scale, where you're literally, you got tens of thousands of years to collect this material. You probably got a stockpile of it at this point.
Well, and it does answer a lot of questions, like
But that's also based off of the fact that I think they're all AI driven. You know, I think these would be like way stations that could either build or repair them. You know, so.
Well, actually that's and that's something that I really like, this AI based. I love the von Neumann probe idea, right? And part of that is just the statistical likelihood of seeing those.
Well,
first.
I just kind of look at it from this point of view. The first thing we do with all of the planets that we can get to is we send things to them.
Yeah.
Right? And if we go there, what are we going to do there? We're going to leave things to monitor while we're gone. Why wouldn't they? You know, I mean, it just makes sense. You know, if say there was, you know, non-human intelligence that did come to this planet at any given time in our history, they could be long dead now, but we're seeing the remnants of their technology. You know, AI-driven tech that was left here to monitor the situation on the Earth. It could explain why, you know, a lot of it is very, very like not. They don't interfere with what we do, but they seem to be interested in all the you know, nuclear deterrence, war, air shows. You know, anytime there's a big collection of anything, they seem to be interested. You know, along with other things like environmental. You know, you could have some of these things that are literally just. Well, we don't know, but all they do is collect environmental data. How hot is it here? How, you know, I mean, they could be just that mundane.
Yeah.
And we would have no idea because it's such an advanced technology. You know, and of course it's a technology, so what happens to all technology is eventually it fails. On, you know, say in the 50s, we happen to get one that crashed and failed. You know, we could start reverse engineering that from the 50s on. All of a sudden we come up with solid state technology. You know, I mean, not taking away from anybody that develops this technology, but, you know, those ideas could have definitely come from, you know, you know, a reverse engineered program.
Now, one of the areas for me there's been some confusion, I guess, and this just personally was,
okay.
I had kind of said to myself, you know, all of the UFO lore is just that. It's storytelling, it's embellishment. Over time, it builds up, right? And I was like, so the Nimitz story, I'd interpreted that the same way you are. I was like, this is some kind of AI robotic probe.
And that's what it felt like, you know.
But then the David Grush narrative, when he started to take it back into that area of lore, that for me, that was what caused confusion. I said, you know what, I have to rethink this. He's talking about ET biologics and stuff.
Now, the biologic could be a little bit of a, at least for me, from my perspective, there's nothing saying that inside these craft they don't have biotechnology.
Okay.
Because the biotechnology could be self-replicating, it could be self-repairing, it could have a lot of benefits over time, you know, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be an actual alien.
Well, and what I like about what you're describing, the way you're describing it is this idea of they would explore us the exact same way that we explore other planets, right? Like, we're interested in Mars,
if they did come here, they had a lot to do with us to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a lot of the source of, you know, a lot of our older lore and things of that nature when they were still present amongst us, you know, and, you know, every religion is a religion for a reason. Generally, you see some type of miracle, you know, just, I hate to say it, but, you know, sufficiently advanced technology is no different than magic. All this stuff is just, you know, things I've thought about over the years. I mean, none of it has any type of, you know, there's no proof of it. It's just a logical path that I followed from knowing that there is a massively advanced technology on the planet. You know, so in my rational mind, I'm trying to figure out how could this be without us being taken over, without us being, you know, have some type of alien overlord, or without them constantly coming and checking in on us, or really just the majority of the people of the world being able to see this, because when it comes down to it, anybody that's seen a UFO is still the minority of the population. It doesn't happen very often. So
well, and from what you described, again, the impression that I've had is, at least in the Nimitz encounters, there was almost a disinterest, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, there didn't seem to be like a mad rush, or even like a you know, it's like, you know, the captain wasn't coming down to the scope saying, "Oh my God, what are these things?" You know, he didn't. You know, I didn't even see him come down at all. You know, I mean, there was no officers freaking out about it or anything like that. We weren't having an all call about it. We weren't going to general quarters about it. You know, usually, like say we have an unknown aircraft coming in, not squawking IFF at Mach speeds. Obviously, some type of, you know, enemy combatant.
Yeah.
You know, we identify it as an enemy combatant. Immediately, we're going to general quarters. You know, immediately we're doing threat assessments. We never did a threat assessment for this thing. You know, we basically, okay, there's 3 objects not squawking any type of IFF, basically floating across the Pacific Ocean right along the coast of the United States. I say that poses something that we should have investigated immediately.
Yeah.
But no, we track them for 7 days. No, they tell us to check our systems. You know, they're trying to say these solid tracks are, you know, go check your systems, make sure that there's no problem with them. We check them up and down, they're still there, you know?
So there have been other, and the name escapes me, but there's been at least one other Navy encounter since then. I think there was one in 2019.
Well, that was the gimbal on for 2015 on the East Coast.
So have you had other former military, former Navy personnel reach out to you? Because now
Yes.
you're more of a public figure, and I think you're definitely an inspiration to people to come out and speak about their experiences, but I think you're also in a leadership position in terms of people are like, okay, maybe I had this experience, I can reach out to Gary.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and I do get those emails a lot, you know, and I get a lot of pilots, I get a lot of ex-military personnel that, you know, I actually get a lot of guys that were stationed in Iraq. That
Okay.
come forward and say they see some pretty odd stuff, you know, and you know most of them won't go on record. They just want to tell their story, and that's perfect. I completely understand that, you know, because I mean, if you're still active duty or if you have a government job, you know, you definitely don't want to come out about this. The stigma is not dead yet.
Well, in terms of transparency, and this goes to what you were saying earlier, I think we saw with the balloon cases, right? Adjusting the radar to pick these things up immediately showed gaps, you
Yeah.
know? And the Chinese spy balloon case, I think, it showed us a lot of other things. From what I understand, the DoD was aware of those. They had just basically ignored them, probably because they said, oh, these are just weather radar and we don't want to deal with it, right? But so then once
You can't have foreign anything coming over, you know, just floating over us, just taking thousands of pictures and monitoring. I mean, who knows what kind of equipment they had on those things?
So we've already had some successes from the UAP issue because the Chinese spy balloon issue really came out of this renewed interest in UAP.
Yep.
And so that's already a major victory in terms of
No, I
American
absolutely
defense.
agree, because I mean that's the safety of the public itself, because like I said, you don't know what's on those balloons. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, they could send a small thermonuclear device, and it in itself's not going to do a lot of damage, but the EMP from it could destroy, you know, infrastructure. A large enough EMP over the United States could literally send us to the dark age.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's just floating across and we're not seeing it on radar, all of a sudden everything goes dark except for our hardened locations. That's a bad situation, you know. So I call that a big win. And by them changing the window at which they're looking at, they started looking at stuff that's a little bit slower, and they started looking at stuff that's a lot faster. You know, and that changing that, I think, is going to help them, but not help us. I mean, it's in the UAP field. Yes, that is definitely a win, but it's not like they're giving the data on the other objects that they shot down.
See, and one of the things that I would love to see, especially in that Aero report, is a larger focus on, you know, we could almost call it like proactive policing, right?
Yeah.
But again, like going
Transparent, proactive policing.
Yes. Well, yeah, like engaging the public to contribute. And then one of the things that I would absolutely love to see from Aero is not an expert in everything.
Yeah.
And I would love to see them engage with the SCU. I'd love to see them engage with the UAPx.
Well, we did have a meeting with them.
Okay, could you tell me about that?
We had a meeting with Kirkpatrick and a couple of his subsidiaries, and we went over all the things that we've done. You know, our first expedition, what we think, and we explained to him about the publications that we did know of, and Kevin Knuth's publications, and the things everything that we knew about everything.
Okay.
And honestly, we never heard back from them. You know, they just kind of took all the information, said, okay, thanks, and just, you know, and nothing. So
do you think that was kind of a cultural issue? Is that's
I think it was just to feel us out, to see what our company was about and what we were really doing.
Okay.
You know, see whether or not they need to be involved. You know, and that's only natural for a government agency. You know, and then, you know, in that meeting, Kirkpatrick was in that meeting, so and he did have a lot of technical questions. You know, he definitely, you know, he asked us, did we check with NOAA? You know, he had a lot of good input on things that, you know, we definitely should have checked, and we did after the fact. You know, but when you try to check with NOAA about something, you know, it's hit or miss. You know, you might have to end up FOIAing the information rather than them just giving it to you. You know, and not that they don't want to give it to you, they just don't have time. They're running a program. You know.
Well, they are, and from what I understand, I've heard that they have something around 50 people, which seems like a lot, but then when you look at the amount of data they're going through.
Yep.
That's actually spread pretty thin, and this is one of the reasons that I've wondered if, especially as, again, UAPx and the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies and other organizations are starting to raise the level and the quality of work that's out there, right?
And that's what's really needed. I mean, the quality of the scientific analysis, you know, we got to move from lawn chairs and look, there's something, and then snapping a picture, to national grids, watching the skies 24 hours a day, monitoring for hypersonic vehicles, radiation spikes, thermal data. You know, I mean, radio frequency, EM data coming off any objects that are flying. You know, I mean, anything that's not ours needs to be monitored and tracked 24 hours a day across an entire network of stuff. And I think once we get to that point, we're going to be very surprised at the traffic that's really there. You know, and especially once we start being able to actively track stuff that's beyond, you know, Mach 10 plus. You know, so I think once we get into the range where we can just, you know, like kind of like we're now, we can have, you know, your cell phone does a great job at 4K. You know, you got a nice camera here. This stuff would have cost you a mortgage 10 years ago. You getting into
it's ubiquitous today.
To be to do an interview like this in a hotel room would be almost impossible. You know, now you can literally stuff all this stuff in a backpack.
Well, and
you
so
know, and still do a professional job. Now, you know, 10 years from now, everything will be exponentially even better. So I'm hoping by that point we can do the same type of thing, track hypersonic vehicles with the equipment. A lot easier. I mean, we can still do it now, but it costs a fortune.
Yeah, and so this actually brings us back to this conference. I forgot his name, but there was an individual here with a startup company, and he's not the only one, but he just brought a multi-spectrum analysis device. And so it's doing visible, thermal, infrared. He's got a 360 cam. He has passive radar, and I believe he has some kind of a sound measurement device. And
is it infrasound?
I think so. It all goes into his laptop.
That's just really super low frequencies.
It's for me. This goes exactly to what you're saying.
Yeah.
We are getting so much better at data collection and analysis on this, right?
Now, when you take all of those different modalities and you combine them, put a timestamp on them, sync them up, and make sure you know the azimuth of every camera, you know exactly what point in the sky, you geolocate every single camera so you know its location and the way it's pointing, so you can then later on do the math on anything that comes across its camera path. And then you take that later on and you can actually correlate data based off the timestamps for each device. You know, so say you get something visible, on visible light. Then you can go to your thermal cameras and your ultraviolet light cameras, and you can then correlate that. You go to your radiation detection, your muon detectors, and see what was going on at that same time. Did we have a spike in radiation? What kind of radiation? What were the power levels of the radiation? What was there any type of EM field coming? Did we get a strong RF burst from it? Did we and if it was an RF burst, what frequencies were they at? What was the environmental details? Was there any dramatic change in the temperature, the wind, the actual weather itself, the barometric pressure? All of these things together paint a much better picture than just one camera staring at the sky. And that's really where we want to focus at UAPx on doing, is using all of these different modalities to paint a much better picture of what we're looking at, to do our analysis and try to, when we do find these things, we want to be able to have a rich data set to prove it. Not just one camera, not just one angle, not just one type of device. So using all of these devices, all synced in time, all utilizing similar software to collect this data to make a bigger picture is what's going to move it forward, at least in the meantime.
And what you're talking about also goes to, I think, a lot. There are so many unknown videos, right? And we live in the age, I've heard several people say this lately, you can't just trust video anymore because of AI. But then there are also other things, like there's an individual out in California who believes he's filming UAP, although some people have said they're insects that are just a lot closer to the lens.
It could be.
There's the jellyfish video, which to me looked really intriguing, and somebody said, no, that's just some kind of bug splatter in the lens. I said, maybe. So
to me, it kind of looked like bird poop on the outside lens of a dome. So you got a camera on the inside, you got the dome, all of a sudden the camera's moving or the dome's moving, something's moving in conjunction with the camera, and all of a sudden, you got, I could be completely wrong. I am not a photo expert, but to me, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, and
first thing I think, that's bird shit on a dome window of a camera.
But then this also goes to this, it's almost like the he said, she said, because I tend to agree with you. When I looked at that, I was like, this is some kind of a stain or something. And I know that there are people who adamantly disagree with that. And
there's always going to be.
Being able to look at the UV and the IR and some kind of radar or sound.
Yeah, if there were different modalities, that wouldn't be an issue. All of a sudden we go to a visible light. What does it look like in visible light? What does it look like in ultraviolet? What does it look like in night vision, like a night vision mode, instead of thermal? So I mean, there's so many different frequencies we can look at it. Did it have an EM signature? Yeah. Did it have was it dropping anything? Let's analyze the video. Did it have a radiation source? Was it radioactive? Was it all this information that's not provided is what we need. That's what the military has. They have radar data, they have environmental data, they have telemetry data. We need that same type of data. Someday, hopefully if we ever get some crazy, rich billionaire investor, we can start using phase-arrayed radars, just like I did in the Navy. Okay. And actually start tracking the skies. Of course, with the FAA, clearing everything, making sure everything's done the proper way with permits and everything like that, because, we don't want to down any airplanes or anything like that. But, we can, as civilians, we can still get a hold of phase-arrayed radars.
Well, and that highlights the mission with UAPx is, you're going out there and you're actually going after information as opposed to, waiting for it to come in. Yeah. And that's not negative. I mean, like places
No, I love the fact that there's a lot of people working on that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to wait for that. That's going to take years. If we can take that data set that they already have and replicate it with civilian equipment, then we're already ahead of the game. So if we can get, like I said, until we can get this advanced technology monitoring the skies in a grid across the entire honestly, the whole planet. But I'll settle for a couple states right now. But I think once we actually start monitoring that stuff 24 hours, it's going to be apparent that it's not as uncommon as you think, especially in places that we know for certain that they fly, in a lot of training zones for the Navy. That first and foremost, I know two different training zones, one down where they were where Ryan was talking about their training area.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Off the East Coast, and over there by Catalina Island. So that whole area is a hot spot. Let's get monitoring stations on all the islands and on the coast of California. Let's get it down in Baja. Let's track them all the way down the coast.
Yeah. There's a lot, and then UAPx, again, you're right in the middle of all of this. And I think that's wonderful, because for you, this is the continuation of a story, right, that started with that Nimitz event.
Yeah. So it's the quest to answer questions that I don't even understand yet.
Yeah.
So like I said at the beginning of the interview, is that literally the only thing I know is that there's an advanced technology. That's it.
Well, on that note, Gary, let me thank you so much, absolutely so much for your time today. I can't think of any more questions. I mean,
well, we'll definitely end up having to get back wrap again. I mean, there's going to be more things that go on. There's going to be, I'm sure you're going to think of 30 more questions after we're done.
Okay.
But like you said, we're at the conference, so I can't be rude. We gotta, we gotta go mingle.
Yeah.
So,
well, Gary, thank you yet
not
again.
a problem.
Sir.
Anytime, man.
Okay.
Yeah.